Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. If you know me, you know that I value a powerful emotional experience over just about every other aspect of a game. If the story and characters are clicking, then bad gameplay or shoddy graphics aren't going to be a deal breaker. With that in mind, I wanted to share a few RPGs that shook me to my core. I'm talking about the sort of resonating emotional experience that you can't help but tell your wife all about in great detail, even though she has no idea what you're talking about and probably would much rather get back to watching reruns of Columbo. True story. These are games that left me, I think, shook is the word the youth uses, or used, I should say. I'm sure they've moved on to something else by now. It's been a few months. Anyway, I'm gonna do my absolute best to keep this spoiler light, but if any of these games are ones you would rather experience completely knowledge-free, then go ahead and skip around. But please, if you wouldn't mind, can you like the video? And if you like RPGs and or me, could you subscribe? And leave a comment below with an example or two of a game that left you emotionally devastated. It'll be good for you. Like therapy. Anyway, on to the list. In Octopath Traveler, there are like, 8 stories, and all of them are pretty emotionally resonant in their own ways. But the one that hit me the hardest was Alphen. He's an apothecary, which means he travels around the world healing people who are sick and injured. I mean, it's kind of hard not to like the guy. When he was a child, he caught some extremely nasty plague that was going around. Wonder what that's like. But anyway, some passing apothecary helped save his life, and that inspired him to do the same when he grew up. From the setup, it's pretty clear that Alphen's story isn't really going to be one about world-ending stakes. He's a small-town doctor who decided to take his show on the road. So in all honesty, I was prepared to be underwhelmed. Maybe that helped to tee me up for the emotional gut punch that his story would be. I did not expect the story of a wandering doctor to dig into some deep issues, like the ethics of healing, or maybe a better way to put it is the possible existence of an ethical responsibility not to heal. Without giving away the whole plot, let's just say that Alphen's morals are challenged pretty thoroughly throughout the course of his story, and the way he comes out the other side definitely left me in need of medical care. Will this be the final time I talk about Crystar on this channel? Will this finally satisfy my need to force an audience to at least give some thought to this underappreciated gem of a game? Will fish require water to survive? The answers to those questions are no, and yes, in that order. But let me tell you why Crystar was so emotionally powerful for me. You play as Ray, a teenage girl who doesn't really have any friends, and who recently experienced the trauma of losing her parents. Because of that, and because anime and video games want us to believe Japanese kids live alone like all the time, it's totally normal, no big deal. Well, Ray is left to care for her younger sister Mirai all by herself. That would be bad enough, except one day, Ray and Mirai find themselves somehow sucked into purgatory. This is the point where you're just not supposed to ask any questions. Sometimes people just get sucked into purgatory. It happens, don't make a big thing out of it. Anyway, while in purgatory, trying to find their way home, Ray accidentally causes Mirai to fall to her death. Obviously, Ray is basically overcome by guilt because of this, so when a couple of demons approach her and offer her a contract that will allow her to resurrect her sister, she takes it without any thought. The macro story of Crystar, Ray trying to save her little sister, it's powerful all on its own, and I absolutely will not spoil any of the crazy twists and turns that it takes. But the smaller character stories we see throughout are plenty heavy on their own. The supporting cast of Kokoro, Sen, and Nanana all have heartbreaking stories of their own, and the game hits you with all of their trauma hard. I guess if you're gonna focus the title and mechanics of your game on crying, you'd better have given me something to cry about. Nice work, Furyu. Nice work. Trails in the Sky has the claim to fame of being the title that introduced me to what is now my favorite video game series of all time. For that, I can say that it already holds a pretty important place in my heart. But even before I was completely enamored with the Trails series, this game did a number on me all on its own. Trails in the Sky follows Estelle Bright and her adopted brother Joshua as they travel around their home kingdom of Liberl to become bracers. Bracers are like sort of a civilian peacekeeping force, not like in the Proud Boys sense, but actually cool and good. For the most part, the first Trails in the Sky game keeps things pretty mellow, as is tradition with new Trails arcs. You're getting to know the characters, you're getting to know the world, you're having a great time. And then, bam! they pull the rug out from under you in the 11th hour and leave you completely winded. Again, I'm avoiding spoilers here, but the ending to this game just absolutely floored me. My wife had to come and scrape me up off the hardwood. This is a series that does cliffhangers well, and it all started here. Suffice to say, by the end, we learned just enough about Joshua's mysterious past and the machinations of the villains who we've kept running into that I was basically begging for more. Of course, if you played this way back in the day when there wasn't any more yet, I can imagine that must have been difficult. I was fortunate in that Trails in the Sky second chapter hit either as I was playing through the first game or almost immediately after I finished. But I could see needing therapy to somehow keep you going if you had to wait for a resolution to that plot. If you're big into characters with strong arcs and storylines that perfectly balance small side plots with big kingdom-spanning epics, you need to give the Trails series a try. It'll make my day. Harvestella tells some incredibly compelling character stories that help to drive its overall narrative. Whether it's Shrika, who's forced to balance her commitment to the church with her growing suspicion that all might not be well in the faith, or Estina, who wants to leave her life of violence behind, but struggles with feeling like she doesn't deserve to be happy. Even minor non-playable characters get some weighty plots, like Cress, the village doctor who wants nothing more than to find a cure for the disease that took her family away. There's a lot of emotion in this game in general, and all of it is punctuated by one of the greatest video game scores of all time by composer Go Shiina. Seriously, it is majestic. The heart of the story and the heart of the game, though, is Arya. She's a mysterious girl you meet very early on and who's found herself far, far away from home. Her struggle to understand what happened to her and what she can do to fix things starts out as the motivating factor that gets the plot moving, and following her as she learns the truth about the world is simultaneously captivating and emotion-shattering. It's easy to fall in love with this cast because the writing is so pitch perfect and the character designs are so detailed and interesting. Even in the absence of spoken dialogue, characters really only speak during battles, which is maybe a little weird, but you can still sense a ton of personality coming from each of them. I don't know whether I can even say that Arya's story is my favorite out of the bunch. It's definitely up there if it's not, but the impact it had on me can't be overstated. Harvestella is a powerful game that absolutely needs more attention, and I will never stop banging on this drum until everyone, at the very least, has given it a try. The problem with prequels is that anybody who's likely to be playing one already knows what's going to happen, right? I mean, the original Lufia in the Fortress of Doom begins with the very end of Lufia 2's story. We get to see the ultimate fates of all the main heroes, so why should we even bother? Because if I've learned one thing, it's that in the hands of a good storyteller, even a completely foregone conclusion can still take a battering ram to our hearts. That's the case here. Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals tells the story of Maxim, a guy who's good with a sword and spends his time hunting and hanging out with presumably the only woman his age in town, who naturally is deeply in love with him, but he's completely oblivious to this because men, am I right? Terrible things start happening in the world and suddenly Maxim and his friends are off on a quest to defeat the Sinistrals, a group that probably could have used some better PR if for no other reason than to come up with a less evil sounding name. You're not doing yourself any favors marketing your brand that way. The uniqueness of this game being a prequel allows for some really interesting dramatic irony that most games don't have. I mentioned the woman in Maxim's hometown who's madly in love with him. Her name's Tia, and if this were any other game, there's a very good chance she'll end up with Maxim in the end. However, anyone who's played even the first 10 minutes of the original Lufia will have a very different perspective on this story point. Somehow, we're almost able to forget what's bound to happen to these characters in the end because the story does such a good job of wrapping us up in the events as they happen, of weaving new story threads to keep us moving forward. By the end, even though we know what's going to happen, we know it, we still find ourselves sort of hoping that something can change. Now, these aren't just a handful of avatars that we control for the prologue of a game we're getting ready to play. They're people that we've come to love and appreciate fully on their own merits. Unless the developers were willing to retcon their work, and good writers aren't eager to do something like that, then we really have no choice but to accept the inevitability. But that knowledge doesn't make it any easier to digest this story when all's said and done. It's powerful storytelling, made even more impressive by its age. The fact that the Lufia series pretty much fell off a cliff is a real shame. And I, for one, would be super excited to see it make a comeback someday. So long as the storytelling is up to this level of quality anyway. Rarely does a Final Fantasy game trigger a truly profound emotional response for me. Don't get me wrong, I love Final Fantasy. The characters, the stories, all of it. But when it comes to truly heart-wrenching moments, I think I can only come up with 2, maybe 3 across the whole series that completely destroyed me. They tend to push different buttons for me is all. But Final Fantasy XVI dissolved me into a puddle of goo, and I've only just recently recovered. The degooifying process is unpleasant. I can tell you that much. If you're unaware, Final Fantasy XVI follows Clive, who, appropriately enough, given the name, has a very British accent and happens to be able to summon icons. His world is one in which magic users are enslaved and giant crystals provide the power source for magic. Basically, every aspect of life is wrapped up in these crystals. Well, wouldn't you know it, it turns out those crystals might just be bad. And Clive has to become not the hero we want, but the hero we need, and take them all out. There's a whole lot of deep metaphor going on in the story of Final Fantasy XVI, so much so that I made a video about it. You can check it out here if you want, just keep in mind it goes into deep spoiler territory. But in any case, this is a game whose emotional impact is helped immensely by the quality of its performances. Every character you meet has some sort of tragedy in their lives, and one of the small joys Clive gets to experience is helping them to resolve those issues. Clive is truly one of the most kind-hearted protagonists I've ever seen in a JRPG. Cloud was a jerk, albeit a misunderstood one. Squall was a jerk, albeit just a jerk. And Zidane was a goofball. But Clive is just... well, he's almost the definition of whatever the opposite of toxic masculinity is. Non-toxic masculinity? I don't like that. Whatever. By the end of the story, I was filled with so many conflicting emotions, so many powerful reactions to what I had just seen and experienced, that I literally could not sleep that night. I lost sleep over how emotionally tumultuous Final Fantasy XVI was. Square Enix has really set the bar high for future Final Fantasies. Now I'm going to be expecting to feel this way each time, and that might be even more challenging than nailing a battle system that everybody's fine with. Anyway, those are some of the games that left me emotionally unstable. Fun, right? Once again, I'd love to hear what games made you feel the feels down in the comments. Try to keep things spoiler-free if possible, though. Again, if you'd like the video to help people find it, that would be awesome. And please consider subscribing, it would mean a ton. Anyhow, that's all for now. Until next time, bye.